Hey guys, hope you're all doing well. Today I've got a really exciting Battlefield 6 video to make today, and this is regarding a Battlefield 6 leak, and I think it's probably the most credible leak that I've come across personally. I think it really gives great insight into the sort of setting that we'll expect. It talks about the multiplayer, the sort of game modes. It talks about the campaign as well, how they're scrapping war stories. It also gives us a release date in this. It talks about holiday 2021 that you can see on screen right now. It talks about a next-gen only Battlefield game. And you have to remember, this post was actually created way back in November 30th, 2019. So I think already this is seeming, to me anyway, it seems like a very credible source. So let's get straight into this. Before we do that, drop us a like, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell notification if you want to keep up to date with everything Battlefield 6. Without further ado, let's jump into it then. So this guy called Stay Frost 886, it gives a bit of context on how he stumbled across this information, how he got a hold of this source really. He was a freelancer, a freelance designer working in Europe, and there was two ex-DICE employees that were working at the firm in Europe with him, and they were very disgruntled, and they just essentially spilled the beans on what was happening at DICE really. And they were talking about the upcoming game. But first he talks about how in 2018 the EA shareholders really wanted a game out there. They wanted to sort of have a 2-year cycle for the Battlefield games, and they needed a game out. And at the time there was 2 games that were being created by DICE, one of them being the World War II setting, and the other being the 2021 concept game that he does get into in this blog post here, in this Reddit post. So essentially they had to pick between, say, a World War II setting, or what he talks about here as the 2021 game being the game set in the modern theatre or around 2030. And DICE decided to go for the Battlefield set in World War II to release in 2018 because in their view they thought that was an easier game to develop because of what they'd done with the World War I game, Battlefield 1, and they thought they could take a lot of the stuff that they learnt in that game and sort of port it over to the World War II setting and get that released in 2018. But obviously we know that it didn't really work out for them because of what the release we saw for Battlefield 5 was just unacceptable. And I think a lot of Battlefield fans could agree upon that and say what we saw for Battlefield 5 was really not the game that we wanted, and a lot of features were missing. Just forget about all the concept of the World War II game that we saw for Battlefield 5. Think of all the features that we saw in that reveal trailer. Things like crash animations, dragging animations. We also saw things like bullets penetrating walls and leaving these massive bullet holes. All that sort of features were just missing from the game. We saw it in the reveal trailer, but why weren't they in the game? Well, this kind of gives us insight into that. Maybe it was down to the fact that it was rushed and they just didn't have enough time to refine it. And maybe they didn't have enough time to put all the content that they wanted in the game. And also it maybe explains why we saw such a poor live service as well. Now, in this leak, it goes further to explain about Bad Company 3, how that was in the works. And essentially Bad Company 3 was in the works until March, April time of 2019. And essentially he says here that they couldn't get the voice actors, they couldn't get the writers or the lead multiplayer designers to come back and consult on Bad Company 3. So what they had to do here again, they had to make sort of a contingency and essentially not scrap it entirely, but take what they'd done in Bad Company 3 for the 2021 release and sort of mould it into something else, which he goes on to state that it's going to be a sort of near future or modern setting, set in 2030, with, say, near future technology like drones, robotics, AI. He also talks about the fact that we're going to see a proper campaign, no war stories here. So a campaign that we saw with, say, Battlefield 3 or Battlefield 4, with more of a narrative really. And then in terms of the multiplayer, we're going to see, say, Levolution that's going to be coming back from, say, Battlefield 4, and it's going to be more fluid. It's going to sort of feel like it's a part of it. You know, with Battlefield 4, we had scripted Levolution where you had to bring down a skyscraper, for instance, in a certain way. What he's saying here, this leaker, is that it's going to fit more in terms of the battle and it's going to feel a lot better and a lot more realistic, really. And the destruction here sounds absolutely incredible. He talks about how you can penetrate walls, and he also talks about here, which was quite interesting, leaving actual bullet holes in the geometry. Now think back to the Battlefield 5 reveal trailer. What did we see there? How bullets were leaving holes in the actual geometry, which looked awesome, by the way. He talks about here, buildings can now fully collapse again. Now think back to the official gameplay that we saw that was released from DICE and EA, talking about the technology that they would bring into the next game. And one of the things that we saw there was a building fully collapsing, or a lot of the building was coming down. It looked really awesome. The physics looked incredible. So I think, again, that fits in from official sources that we have seen. Now, we have to remember that this leak was made in November 30th of 2019, when none of that was released. None of that was to his knowledge, and he couldn't have known that other than him having access to insider information. Now, he goes on to talk about the sort of game modes that we'll expect: Rush, Breakthrough, Conquest, obviously, Air Assault, and then obviously this is what any sort of person could come up with as a leak, let's say. Tanks, APCs, jets and buggies. Now this is quite interesting. He talks about planes that when they're being shot down, he's alluding to the fact that it's going to be a crash land. I'm guessing that's like the crash animations again. Think back to the Battlefield 5 reveal trailer when it was leaving that massive dirt behind. It was like a massive trail of destruction, of dirt picking up. It looked really cool. So maybe that's something, again, that's been ported over to the next Battlefield game in 2021. Maybe it was left out of Battlefield 5 due to possibly the limitations of, say, PS4 or Xbox One. It could be anything. But it's interesting, again, that he's mentioning it in this leak. He talks about drones and robotics, bombing runs. He talks about commander mode as well. That'd be pretty interesting to see that come back. I quite enjoyed that. Needed a bit more fleshing out, really. And this really tops it off for me. This gives him a lot of credibility, and it sort of validates all the things that he was saying. You see here, launching holidays of 2021 for PS5, Project Scarlet, which we now know as Xbox Series X, and PC. So he's got it completely spot on already there, as that it's launching in holidays 2021. Remember, this leak was created in November 30th of 2019, and he was saying that holidays 2021 and a next-gen only game. So a lot of the stuff that he said so far has been correct. So again, gives him a lot of credibility, and that is the reason why I think this is probably the most credible leak that we have seen so far. So if we just look back at it, the things that he said that Bad Company 3 was in the works until March or April time of 2019. Now, if you remember, there was a leaker called Almighty Dak, and he subsequently changed his name to Dakary. And he was one of the guys that was basically talking about how he got the Battlefield 5 setting correct, how it was a World War II game. But you did notice that he wasn't as detailed in his leaks for Battlefield 2018 as he was with Battlefield 2016. And I think that was down to the fact that he was working on old leaks or old information that he'd gathered from inside sources. I think he was very credible up until Battlefield 1, but for whatever reason, I just don't think he was getting the same level of information that he was way back in 2016. And he was probably working on the assumption that the next game that we would see in 2021 would be Bad Company 3, because all that he knew really is that they were still working on a Bad Company 3 game, and he just assumed that they were just going to go with that. Essentially, why Almighty Dak got sort of less accurate with his information was he was just working off old information, but I still see Almighty Dak as a credible person in terms of the older information that he was given. Let's say Almighty Dak was saying that Bad Company 3 was actually in the works. Well, we compare it to this one, and he's saying, yes, Bad Company 3 was in the works, but until April 2019 when it got scrapped and reworked into something completely different or into a modern near future game. I think there's just a lot of things that are riding on this leak, and I think a lot of things that he said have come true already. But yeah, it's pretty exciting. He didn't mention anything about the 64 versus 64, no mention of that. I know in the World War III leak that's recently been floating around, it said 64 versus 64, but I think that's only a rumour that's been started by us because of that trailer that we saw talking about the technology that was going to be produced in the next Battlefield game. So maybe we might see 128 players, but he just didn't know at the time of making this leak. But who knows? But I do think this is quite a credible leak. A near future modern game, awesome destruction, awesome physics, a rush as well, conquest, all the sort of staple modes of Battlefield. Hopefully it's going to be a really fun game to play. I really can't wait for the next Battlefield 6 game. If you are searching for news and information, do us a favour, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. My voice is starting to go here. And subscribe. Make sure you've got all of those bell notifications on. Really does help out a lot. But let me know your thoughts on this leak in the comments down below. Until next time, have a good one.